Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. So this week I'm going to be doing a summer wrap-up. I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I read in June, July, August, and September. I technically consider September fall, but now that it's October, I thought I would do a wrap-up of what I read this summer and stop it right before October. I will say that I read a lot of Kindle books this summer. I didn't get the physical copy, so there is going to be a lot of books that I just read on my Kindle and I don't have the physical copy with me. So let's just get into it. First, I read The Ashes and the Star-Cursed King by Krista Broadbent. I gave it 4 stars. This was the second one in the Crowns of Nixia series. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that correct. I think it's Nixia or something like that. This is about Aurea. Again, fantasy names, I have no idea how to pronounce them, so you're gonna have to bear with me with that. It's about Aurea, who's a human girl who's adopted by the vampire king. She ends up spending most of her childhood being taught to be afraid of vampires, so her only chance to really become something more than a scared human girl is to enter the whatever. It's basically like the Hunger Games. It's a big game where she goes against vampires, and if she wins, she can kind of rise above that fear. I will say I liked the series, and the first one I loved. And the novella in between, it was called Six Scorched Roses. I did really like the novella as well. However, the ending to the first book kind of threw me for a loop, and in this second book, it was a lot of like rebuilding, and I didn't love the second one as much as I loved the first, but I still thought it was really good, and I'm excited for the series to continue. Next, I read another Kindle book. This one is Layla by Colleen Hoover. This is my second Colleen Hoover book that I've read, and you'll see me try again with her books. I honestly just think I'm not a Colleen Hoover fan. I just don't think her books really do it for me. I feel like her books just don't have any depth, and I don't find myself liking any of her characters. Honestly, I don't even know how to describe Layla. It was so confusing. The description makes it sound like a romance, like a rebuilding of a relationship. However, it was nothing like that, and I genuinely had to force myself to finish this because I didn't want to just give it up. I didn't want to write off Colleen Hoover as somebody that I just didn't like because everybody's so quick to hate her because she blew up. But Layla was definitely not the book for me. Then I read Darling Venom by Parker S. Huntington. I still think about this book to this day. It was so good. Definitely look up the trigger warnings, however, though, before you start it, because it was a pretty tough read and has some heavy topics. But I thought the writing was amazing, and I was bawling throughout multiple points in this book. It's a book about Charlotte and Kellen and how they met. We go through their story and then essentially how they are keeping each other alive. I don't want to say much more than that because it'll give away a big part in the story that does kind of happen right at the beginning, but I feel like you need to read it to know. I forgot to tell you what my ratings were. I rated Layla a 1, and I rated Darling Venom a 4.5. Then I read As Good as Dead by Holly Jackson. This is the last book in the series. I think there's a novella as well, but this is the last one in that trilogy. I gave this one a 3.5 stars. I liked it the least out of the 3 books. However, I did feel like it was a good wrap up to the story. I can't really speak much on the plot of this book without giving away spoilers for the other 2, but it was a cute YA mystery series, and I really did enjoy my time. I thought it was a great series. I would say it's about a 4-star series for me. Then I read November 9th by Colleen Hoover. I have the physical copy somewhere, but I couldn't find it. This one I gave a 2 stars. I thought it was better than Layla, but it still was not good. In my opinion, these are all my opinions. Maybe you would love November 9th, but it just wasn't for me. This is probably the last Colleen Hoover book that I'm gonna try reading because I just think her books are not for me. I cannot find any of her characters likable, and again, like I said before, I don't think her books have that much depth. This one was about Fallon and Ben, and they meet in a cafe. Ben is an aspiring novelist, and Fallon has gone through a terrible accident that kind of destroyed her career. They end up deciding to meet once a year on November 9th, the day that they met, and catch up with each other, kind of pick up where they left off on their relationship. I genuinely forced myself to read this book. It took me almost 2 months to finish. I was skimming the end because it was so boring to me. I hated Ben. I didn't like the way he talked or treated Fallon, and I thought the ending was so dumb. I know it's a lot of people's favorite Colleen Hoover book, so I really wanted to give it a try. That's why I forced myself to finish it. And I really wish I could see why people like it, but I just couldn't get past the characters. Then I read Pack Up the Moon by Kristen Higgins. This book hurt. This book hurt so bad. It was a 4-star read for me. It was written so beautifully, and it really tore me up, to be honest. Like, I was bawling for this whole last half. It's about Lauren and her husband Josh. Lauren decides to write letters for her husband Josh for each month of the full year after she passes away, so that he has something to look forward to during his grieving process. Josh's grieving process was genuinely so sad. It really did just tear me up. My only complaint, and the reason why I ended up giving it a 4 instead of a 5, is because I felt like it was a little bit long. Like, there were some parts that were really repetitive, and I know this is about Josh's grieving process, but I felt like there was a little bit too much description in some parts where we could have moved the story along. But overall, it was an amazing book. All right, now we're in July. This is when I started the Chestnut Spring series, and let me tell you, such a great summer series, and I still have a few more books to finish, and the new one comes out soon. So I'm excited to continue the series. Yeah, I read Flawless by Elsie Silver. I gave it a 4 stars. I love the family aspect of each book and how each person brought their own dynamic to the family and how they act around each other. I want to be invited to a family dinner so bad. It was so cute. The first one is about Rhett and Summer, where Rhett is a professional bow rider and Summer works for her dad's company. Summer helps Rhett get out of some PR trouble that he's in, and I just honestly loved their story, loved the country vibes, and you'll see I read another one, but I'm excited to finish the rest of the series. Then I read the Mindfuck series by St. Abbey. I read all 5, and I think I read all 5 over the course of 2 days. I think it was less than 2 days, honestly. They're so good. Each book is super short, and the story is so fast-paced. I would definitely look up some of the trigger warnings before you start, though, because it is a dark romance. I mean, the main character is a serial killer, but I feel like it's tame in the sense of like obviously the characters are morally gray, but she has a good reason, in my opinion, and the romance is more wholesome. The only thing is that it is a little graphic when it does come to the murders, but I think it's pretty tame for a dark romance. So I would definitely, if you're wanting to get into some dark romances, give the Mindfuck series a try. I think it's a great place to start. But yeah, it's about Lana, who's a serial killer, and she falls for, I think he's like an FBI agent or something like that. But Logan is his name. The contrast of good versus bad and the lines blurring between those was super interesting. It was interesting because it was something that I haven't really read before. Like, I haven't really read anything like that. Then I read One for My Enemy by Olivia Blake. I read this kind of during the time when it started blowing up on TikTok and BookTube. I ended up giving this a 3.5 stars. This book was really interesting, and I haven't read anything like it. It's a Romeo and Juliet retelling, but it's in modern times with witches. I don't know if I just wasn't in the mood or if I don't love modern fantasies, but I just kind of felt like something was missing. I did love the writing and I thought the quotes in here were super good, but it kind of felt a little bit flat for me. And everybody was hyping it up at the time, so I was a little sad that I ended up only giving it a 3.5. Now, a 3.5 is still a great rating, but it just didn't give me that like 5-star feeling. Then I went ahead and read Heartless by Elsie Silver. This one also got a 4. This is the second one in the Chestnut Spring series. This is a single dad trope where he falls for the nanny, which sounds so shallow, but it was so good. The nanny is Summer from the first book's best friend, and the single dad is Rhett's brother. So we're still staying in the family. It's super cute. I recommend the whole series. Like, I feel like everybody should read that series, and I'm super excited for the new one that's about to come out. All right, then I read my first Lucy Score book. I read By a Thread. This is my first workplace romance as well, and it was my first workplace enemies to lovers. It's about Dominic and Allie, and Dominic ends up getting Allie fired from her job, and then Dominic's mom comes in and gives Allie a job at the place where Dominic's mom and Dominic works. I ended up giving this a 3-star. I kind of felt like for the age that the characters were, they were acting really immature. And I thought the book was 200 pages longer than it needed to be. There were so many scenes that could have been cut out. I also just don't love enemies to lovers in romance books as much anymore. Now that I've read a bunch of fantasy romances, I feel like you just can't have enemies to lovers in a romance book. Except for Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark, I think it is. That was a great enemies to lovers, but again, that was darker. It's a mafia romance. So like a workplace romance that's enemies to lovers, I just don't think it works. Oh, the next book is Brutal Prince by Sophie Lark. Sorry, I have all my notes over here because I can't remember half the books that I read. So this is a mafia romance, and I did give it 4 stars. I thought this was so good. Wait, sorry, I ended up giving it 4.5 stars. I honestly thought this book was so good, and I flew through it. I was so into the romance, and I don't know if anybody's gonna know what this is, but Episode, the app where you like choose your own story. When I was in middle school, I was obsessed with Episode, and I loved the mafia romances, and this felt like Episode. It was so nostalgic for me. Like, I really felt like I was back in middle school choosing my own story of a mafia romance. The reason why it didn't end up as a 5-star for me was because it kind of did feel like it was written for Episode. Like, it was a little bit cringy. But other than that, I really did love it. Next, I read Love and Other Words by Christina Lauren. This is my second Christina Lauren book. I read The Unhoneymooners earlier this year. And The Unhoneymooners, I think I ended up giving it 3 stars. It was not that great in my opinion, and I thought the characters were really immature. But this one, oh my gosh, the hype is so real. I ended up giving this a 5-star, and I tabbed it. I could just flip to a page and the quotes are gonna be so good. This is a childhood friends to lovers and a second chance romance. It's about Macy and Elliot and how they find their way back to each other, and I highly recommend it. I think everybody should read this. It's one of my top romances all year for sure. Next, I read the Giver series. I have a reading vlog on my channel reading these books. This was my second time reading them. I did read them in like middle school, I think. Maybe it was even elementary school, sometime then. But I did read all 4. You can watch that reading vlog on my channel for more thoughts on each of the books. But I ended up giving The Giver 3 stars, Gathering Blue 4, The Messenger 3, and Sun 2.5, I think. You know what? It's going down to a 2 because this was my least favorite by far. Oh, and the Giver series starts my books that I read in August. I started August by reading all of these. Next, we have Beach Read, which is my first Emily Henry book, and I'm so excited to start reading the rest of her backlog and to get to Happy Place, which came out just a few months ago, and she has another one coming out next year. I'm so excited. But this is also a 5-star, definitely highly recommend, and also up there for one of the best romances that I read this year. This is about Gus and January. They're both authors, and they end up living right next to each other in like Michigan or something. It was such good summer vibes. I highly recommend. Oh, he writes like literary fiction, but it's darker, no happy endings, and she writes like cute little rom-coms where they all have happy endings, and they end up switching genres and trying to write books in each other's genres, and they're so cute. Now we're in September, and the first book I read in September was Things We Never Got Over by Lucy Score. I started the Knock 'Em Out series. I started it the day that the new one came out, the one with the purple cover. And I picked up Lucian and Sloane's book the day that it came out because I was so excited to read this series. Like, everybody talks so highly of it. This one is Knox and Naomi's book, and it's about Naomi kind of coming to the town of Knock 'Em Out to clean up her sister's mess, and she meets Knox. This one is so cute, and I really did love their story, and I kind of don't really love kids in books, but I liked Waylay in this book, and I liked getting to see her throughout the second one. You'll see that I read that one as well in September, sorry. But I really did like Waylay in it, and I liked that kid aspect, and like it's not surprise pregnancy, but it's like surprise, you now have a kid. I also highly recommend this series. This one I gave a 5 stars. I'm super excited to read Lucian and Sloane's book. Next, I read One of Us is Lying by Karen M. McManus. This is a YA romance. Not a YA romance, this is a YA mystery, where it's kind of a play off of The Breakfast Club. You've got the brain, the beauty, the criminal, the athlete, and the outcast who all go to detention, and one of them ends up dead, and then you're kind of going through the story. I think this is a trilogy, if I'm not confused. I think it's a trilogy. I ended up giving this one 3.5 stars. I honestly really did like it. I just felt like some parts dragged on a little bit, and it could have been a little bit shorter in my opinion. Like, it didn't need as much detail. Then I read Things We Hide from the Light by Lucy Score. This is Lena and Nash's story. I definitely liked the first one better than this one, mostly because I just like the characters better. And this one does deal with a little bit heavier of topics than the first one. I still highly recommend this series. Yeah, I have nothing else to say about the series. I just recommend it. Then I read All the Bright Places by Jennifer Niven. I have mixed feelings about this one because it was so sad and I definitely cried. However, I got a little bored in the beginning, and I don't know if that's just because this is like a YA romance. I didn't really connect with the characters that well. I just wasn't really loving it until we got a little bit further in, and then that last half, I really did love it. I ended up giving it 4 stars. I would also look up the trigger warnings for this one because it deals with heavier topics, but I would recommend. Alright, so those are all of the books that I read this summer. Again, most of them were on my Kindle because I was a little Kindle girly this summer. Because it's just easier to read Kindle books at the beach or like on the go, in my opinion. But I hope you enjoyed, and let me know if you read any of the books that I went through, especially some of the ones that I gave 5 stars. I had a few great 5-star reads this summer, and I'm excited to continue on with some of those series and authors, trying new books from those authors. Yeah, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I will see you next week. Bye.